Hey everybody, George with the Art of Water, and I wanted to talk to you today about algae and how to control it in your nano tank or your larger tanks. Couple things that I wanted to talk about. There's 4 points that I kind of want to hit on here to make sure that everybody understands why algae is a problem, how it becomes a problem, and what to do about it or how to prevent it in the first place. Number one, the first thing that I talk about with people that ask me about algae issues and are concerned about the possibility or the prospect of algae starting to grow in their tanks. The number one thing is to plant as many plants in a tank as you can possibly afford and fit in there um, when you first set up the tank. I think that's probably the number one thing that you can possibly do. The reason for that is the plants that you have in your tank, the nutrients that algae require to grow are going to be sucked up by those plants, and it's going to limit the capabilities for algae to even get a start, period. So that's the number one point. The number two thing is the population of fish in your tank. Once your tank is cycled, you're going to see that there are small amounts of little brown algae, which is very common in any aquarium. If, in fact, if you don't have a little bit of brown algae on the leaves of your plants and that sort of thing, your aquarium is probably not that healthy. But I get through that cycled part, and in this particular tank here, this is a nano tank, this is a 5 gallon, and it basically has a little bit of brown algae that you'll see on the leaves, but that basically is food for the autocinclids that I have in here, and they're basically the cleanup crew for this particular tank. If any kind of algae gets started at all, they knock it down. Now, a lot of people use shrimp as well to eat algae, but I have found that shrimp in a nano tank with fish, unless you're doing just a strictly species type shrimp tank, I don't find it to be very good on your plants, because if there's not enough algae in there for the shrimp to eat, they will take advantage of chewing up your plants quite a bit. So, one of the things you want to be careful with is making sure you understand what you're going to put in the tank, the population of the tank, don't overpopulate it, and don't overfeed your fish. Fish don't need to be fed near as much as what people would think. These fish here get fed once a day, a very small amount, and they're thriving. But overfeeding and overpopulating your tank is a big reason why people get algae blooms in the first place. Now, if you look at the top of the tank here, you're also going to see that there is some water lettuce at the top of this. And you'll see that there's quite a root system that's hanging down here. Those have to be trimmed occasionally just because they just sort of get out of hand. But those particular plants I find to be very beneficial in almost every tank that I have. In fact, I use them in some kind of floating plants in every tank that I have, just because the root systems that hang down act as almost a filtration system. As you can see, the water is just crystal clear in here, and you'll see the reason for that, I think, is because of the amount of plants, number one, that we have in here, and number two, the types of plants that we have. I think that these floating plants really do act as a filtration system all on their own, and I would recommend that to everybody that is starting an aquarium. Once your tank is established, actually you can throw them in right away with the rest of your plants, so you don't even need to get them established. But you got to control them a little bit, because they will get these long root systems. That's just a sign that your tank is healthy. Has nothing to do with they're trying to reach that substrate at the bottom. There is basically what they're trying to do, and I just snip off the longer ones occasionally when I'm doing maintenance on the tank. and that really basically keeps that under control. The third thing I want to talk about is water changes. Water changes, every video that I do and I put on YouTube, the one thing that I push really hard is 50% water changes twice a week. Now, I don't know how many tanks you have. If you just have a simple 1 nano tank, and that's really the extent of your hobby, if you don't have 15 minutes a week to do a 50% water change in your tank, then you probably shouldn't be in this hobby in the first place. But if you do that in a nano tank of 5 gallons, 50% water change twice a week is really going to keep that water crystal clear. It's really, really going to help, and it's going to get a lot of the extra items of minerals and things like that algae thrive on. It's going to really pull them out of the tank and not even give it a chance to get started. The fourth thing that I want to talk about is lighting. Lighting is so important. One of the things that we talk about with tanks is how much light we need to grow plants. Well, it depends on the plants that you have. All the plants that are in this particular tank are either low maintenance or medium to low maintenance. So there's not a lot of light requirements that are needed here. Also, the lighting was chosen for this particular tank for the species of fish that we have in here, which are celestial pearl danios and dwarf sparkling gouramis. They do not like a ton of light in their tank. They rather enjoy the shady areas of the tank, which the water lettuce provides that. But also, if the lights are kept at a lower system, then you'll find that you'll have less algae as well. I think that's really important. If you've got low maintenance or low need, plants, or moderate need light for your plants, then a dimmable light of some kind that just has the blue and the white LED is going to work really well for you. This particular tank is just, it really doesn't do the appreciation in the video that you would see if you were standing here in person and looking at it, because it is quite beautiful. And I attribute that to the fact that the light is perfect for this, and everything in here, in the variety of plants that we have growing in here, is just thriving. We don't have any algae issues whatsoever. We do have a little bit of brown algae on some leaves that get started, but we have a couple of autocinclids in here. That's really basically their food source. They kind of serve as a cleanup crew, and they go around and sort of take care of that. Now, one thing that I forgot to talk about, and I guess it's a fifth point that I should make about algae, is at some point in your working in this hobby and having tanks, there may be times that you're going to have to be out of town, or you're not going to be able to stay up on your tank as much as you would like to because your life gets busy or whatever. But and you're going to come home and you're going to find that some algae is maybe started because those water changes weren't done, or whoever you had taking care of your fish while you're gone overfed them. Fish do not need a lot of food. That is really, really important to stress again. I think I talked about that earlier in the video, but fish do not need a lot of food. I give all of these fish a small amount of food once a day. I do not feed them more than once a day. A lot of people will suggest that you should feed them 3 times a day. Small amounts. I disagree with that. That's something, if you have a comment about that and you have more information about that you want to share, you're welcome to do it, but it certainly works for me. These fish are extremely healthy. In fact, the sparkling gouramis are so happy. If you listen back just a couple of, about 20 seconds, 30 seconds ago into this video, you heard what is the chirping sound that the sparkling gourami does. That's another video that we talked about here about a week or two ago about these sparkling gouramis and the noises that they make, and people have no idea that they even make these noises, but you can hear them chirping in here. It's kind of a chirping sound. It's kind of a cross between a croak of a frog and a cricket. It's a kind of an unusual sound, but they do it, and if you want to hear it, it's in this video. I think I've heard these guys do that about 3 times while I've been videoing this, so that'll give you a chance to hear these sparkling gouramis. That just means one thing: they're very happy in the environment that they're in. They're thriving in this particular tank, and that's a good thing. So I hit on all the points here on algae. If you do end up with an algae problem of some sort, get it under control right away. Do some water changes. Stay up on those water changes. If it gets out of control, algae into your tank, it really is a bummer, and a lot of people just sort of throw up their hands and get out of the hobby because of it. I don't want to see you do that. I'm going to walk you over here in my office, and we're going to visit another tank that is a 10-gallon. And this is a tank that's been set up for a while. I would say probably about 8 months, 9 months maybe. And but we just rescaped it here maybe a couple weeks ago. Again, no algae issues whatsoever in this tank. We just don't have them. This tank here is crystal clear. It's basically a tank with ember tetras, and we also have Chili raspora in here. And the rock that we chose here was some Utah sandstone, and we think that that really brings out the colors of the fish, and also the red spiderwood in here, which if you do put wood in your tank and you put spiderwood in your tank, make sure that the supplier that you get it from, it's seasoned wood where it's not going to have the white slimy bloom on it that can happen with these pieces of wood. It gets unsightly. It doesn't harm your fish at all. Basically, all it is a carbohydrate that leaches out of the wood, and the bacteria from your filtration system basically attacks that carbohydrates and creates an environment for that to grow. I take pieces of wood, even if somebody has told me that they've seasoned the wood and that's not going to happen, I soak them in a pail for about 2 months with a heater. That is so important to understand, with a heater, because it is not an algae, but it is a fungus of a type. It basically is a fungus, and if you want to prevent that, like I said, soak it in a pail, a 5-gallon pail, or whatever size piece of wood you have that's completely submerses it for several weeks with a heater on, so that it replicates the environment that your tank is going to have. As you can see up here, we have the water lettuce in this tank as well. Now I'm going to go down the bottom here. This tank here is really Harlequin rasporas, and that's really all that's in here. And again, we have the water lettuce floating on the top, and as you can see, the tank is crystal clear. These fish are extremely happy. This is basically a 5-gallon tank, and we have maybe 8 fish in here, and I would never do anything more than that because these fish don't get that big. So they'll do just fine in here. I think the 1-inch limit on the gallon is a little bit too overstated and not necessary to follow that rule 100%. But you really need to know your tank and your environment that it's in. And again, no algae in this tank whatsoever. Whatever algae, brown algae we might see on the stones and the wood and that sort of thing over a period of time really gets taken care of by what I told you earlier, those little auto sink lids. I wish I could find one for you right now. I can't. These are pretty heavily planted tanks, so it's kind of hard to find fish that don't just swim all the time. They're off kind of doing their cleanup job. Anyways, this is George with the Art of Water. If you have any questions, leave me a comment. Please subscribe, and don't forget to give a thumbs up on it. If you have any questions, I will get back to you. Just hit the bell on that, and we'll talk to you soon.